Everyone, this is a short video to show how to add some functionality into the user interface that was generated by the designer tool. So we're going to start off with the code that was generated. Now, as I said before, you can't change this code in any way, because if you do and make any changes in Designer, this code will be overwritten. So any change you make would be lost. Okay, I'm going to have it open because I will be referring back to it as time goes on. What I've done is I've created a second Python file, okay, one that I've created myself. I've called it first app.py, and the first line of code is this one from my first app import star. What I'm doing is I'm basically telling this Python file to import the code here, and that's because I'm going to be using it within my own program. I've used from my first app import star instead of just simply import my first app, just so I don't have to type in my first app whenever I want to use it. I've also import sys because I'm going to need that later as well. Now, the way this works is through basic inheritance. So I've created a second class called first app, and it's inheriting UI underscore main window. This is not some arcane QT5 stuff. It's actually the name of this class. So this class is called UI underscore main window. So when it generates it, it will call it UI underscore and then whatever you've called your main window in the app. So that's where that's come from. So because it's inherited it, it's going to have access to all the methods that was in this one. Okay, and the most important method here is the setup UI method. Now what this does is it adds all the widgets that you're going to need in your application. So basically adds everything in, creates them, adds them, so you can use them. So in my constructor, I've got two things of interest. First of all, I'm passing through a window. Okay, I'll talk about that in a moment. And then I call the setup UI. It's important that you run the setup UI almost immediately before you do any connecting of buttons to methods, because otherwise, the buttons won't exist and nothing will exist because it's not been created yet. So we're passing through a window, and that window is created outside the class. So down here on lines 19 and 20, I've got an application being created. So we got to create an application before we can actually create windows. I'm passing through this sys.rv. What that is basically command line arguments that the program was run with. This is just kind of stuff that we put in, which will be useful if we had like a really complicated app and had command line arguments. But for this app, it's not actually needed. I've only put it in there because most examples on the internet use it, and if you actually look at my first app, you can see that's how it's done it as well. So I'm just kind of following and copying, following the trend, as it were. I then create a main window. Okay, so this is the window we're going to link the app to. And then I pass that through when I create an instance of our app. So notice I've got the name of my class here, first app, and I'm passing through that main window object for it to set up. So the next thing is to make things link together. So I'm just going to comment out this line of code and uncomment this one. So this self.push button is the button in my user interface. If I go back to setup UI, you can see that I've actually created it here. So it's a Qt widget push button, and it's set up the text inside and all that kind of stuff. So self.push button. Then I've got .clicked. Now every widget has what's known as signals in Qt5. A signal is essentially an event. So a click event or clicked basically means when I click on it, I want to do something. So .clicked, and then I want to connect that signal to a method. So I'm going to connect it to the method clickMe. Okay, so that's down here, and I've created it here. And all it does is say I've been clicked as a simple print. Notice I've had to put self dot because this is a method. So I'm going to run this app now. And what you'll be able to see is when I click on the button, it runs that code. Okay, so that's the basic idea of signal or event-driven programming. I'm going to uncomment this one, and I'm going to use a second example, which is slightly more complicated. Ever so slightly, nothing major though. So I've called this show name. So I've followed the same principle, push button.clicked. So when I've clicked the push button, I connect it to show name, and show name does one extra thing. It will pull out the text from the line edit that I have in my user interface. I've called the line edit txt name, and if I go back to setup UI, you can see it's right there. And the .text method basically returns whatever has been typed inside that text box. I then am simply going to go hi text, as I would normally do with a print. So I'm going to run it this time, and I'm going to type in Bert, press the button, it says hi Bert. If I type in Sally and press click me, because of hi Sally. So that is essentially how to get basic user interface actions going. A couple of gotchas. First of all, make sure you do call self.setup UI before you do any linking, because otherwise it's not going to work. And secondly, although this looks a little bit complicated, it must be there every time. You need to create an application, then a window. You need to create an instance of your class and link it up to the window, and then finally tell the window to show and the application to execute. Almost every Qt program will have the same kind of pattern, so you get used to it as you get on.